Dear mama, I don't wanna be no doctor. I'd rather do nothing at all. I feel like whenever I try shit, it's like I'm just destined to fall. I know.
Welcome. We're here with Sunrise Movement Baltimore. Go ahead and introduce yourselves so everybody can get the names.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kiana. I'm with Sunrise Movement Baltimore. Been a part of the movement for a few months, and I'm really excited to be here.
And my name is Evelyn Hammond. I've been involved in Sunrise Movement Baltimore for about a year and a half now.
And my name is James Duffy. I recently joined Sunrise Movement, and I'm helping out specifically with local politics.
And then
we're all on our political team and focus on local issues in Baltimore City.
Okay, and then everybody knows me, Ebenezer, and then we also got Sam with us today on the
I'm a newbie.
Yeah, first time.
Newbie to the podcast.
But
hello and welcome.
Thank you so much.
I guess the first question I had, just give everybody a little background for what Sunrise Movement is, for those who are unfamiliar.
So we are a movement of young people across the United States working to fight climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. We're organizing for a Green New Deal primarily at the federal level, but we also know that it needs to be built at state and local levels as well. And we know that a Green New Deal is really the only plan that's been put forward to address the intersecting crises of climate catastrophe, racial inequality, and economic inequality at the scale necessary to tackle all of these problems.
Okay, and then you guys are the Baltimore chapter. So Sunrise Movement is like a national movement, and this is specifically the Baltimore chapter. I know there's what, about 5, 6, 7 other chapters in Maryland, correct?
Yes, a lot of them are associated with universities. I think we're the only one that's just based out of like a town. I think most of the other ones are connected to a university. Does that sound right to you, Evelyn?
I think there's Howard County.
Howard County. There's Frederick, but I think Howard County is primarily like organized around a high school as well. But we also have some friends who are in the Howard County Hub who also organize with us here in Baltimore. Especially like now with COVID and pretty much all of our organizing being online, it's a lot easier, frankly, to connect with people who are a little bit outside of our immediate local area.
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. COVID's made these virtual podcasts are a lot easier to set up as far as and we can also get a wider variety of guests as well. But so as far as the movement is concerned, when did the actual movement itself start? Also, when did the Baltimore chapter start as well?
So the Baltimore chapter started in December 2018. The movement really was founded in 2016, 2017. I know that the founders were doing some organizing around the 2016 election. We're frankly like really preparing for a Clinton win. We wanted to push Hillary Clinton to make bold climate action a central part of her presidency and really switch gears under the Trump administration and really just exploded in popularity after the sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office after the 2018 midterms. And that's around the time that our hub got started.
Yeah,
and
I read that on the website. Yeah, you guys.
That's how I first found out about Sunrise.
Yeah, that was like the key point from the I was reading just like the Baltimore's movements about page. I obviously saw that was a key movement from or at least for Baltimore's startup. So like what are the main issues you guys are trying to tackle now in Baltimore?
So one of the big ones that we're trying to tackle is zero waste. So trying to transition Baltimore away from the linear waste stream that we have now where everything ends up in either the incinerator and the landfill to more of like a cyclical cycle where things are being recycled, reused, composted. That's one big one. Evelyn, are there any others you want to speak to? And James, you want to hop in?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we're here to, just really talk about environmental injustice in Baltimore, and I'm here to talk about like the huge lead crisis that's in our city, that's disproportionately affecting Black communities and the Black butterfly. In neighborhoods like Sandtown, Winchester, up to 40% of children have lead poisoning, and that's really not okay. And so, definitely here on the political team, we, supported Brandon Scott's campaign for mayor, and hopefully helped deliver him his primary and general victory. And he really made, tackling the lead paint crisis a huge part of his campaign. And yeah, we hope to really hold him accountable to that.
Yeah, I know that's been. No, go ahead, please. You go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, and my background is in environmental studies and things like that. So looking at specifically issues of urban foresting and how these different initiatives can tackle multiple problems at once. So how can we innovate and rebuild a lot of communities that have been historically marginalized with the same goal of helping to alleviate a lot of environmental issues. So things like access to clean water, and talking about access to green spaces and the resources of the bay and things like that. Those are some other things that I think are really interesting that Sunrise Baltimore is kind of looking at.
Yeah, I think it definitely a lot of the problems, a lot of the singular problems you can focus on. They don't just fix themselves; they also fix things around them. It's like the lead paint crisis. I mean, as far as I've seen that it's connected to just the crime rate because it makes just how it affects that. And so if you make the environment better, then it seems that crime will go down as well. And obviously those are two big things that Baltimore has challenges with.
Yeah, it seems to me there's so many problems going on in Baltimore City right now. It seems like most mayors were running on the whole program of better opportunities for people within the city and the crime rate and stuff like that. And it almost seems like a lot of the local politicians tend to drown out our environmental issues right here in the city. I was wondering, is there any local politicians that you guys have gotten support from or you hope to get support from?
Like I said, we endorse Brandon Scott, and feel that we have a pretty good working relationship with him. We really supported him because he frankly is a community organizer, and he really wants to continue to collaborate with grassroots organizations that are really doing the work for justice in Baltimore and all sorts of different issues. We also endorsed Franca Muller-Paz for his city council, and unfortunately, she did not win her election. But we're really excited to see her continue to organize in Baltimore. We're also friends with Ryan Dorsey.
Yeah, we chat a lot with Ryan Dorsey. He supports and he's in line with a lot of the same policies that we support. So one of the things that he wants to do is, take old parking lots and convert them into electric charging stations. Throw some solar panels over parking garages. So we support all of those types of initiatives, and we've worked with him on those. We don't officially endorse Mary Pat Clark as a councilwoman. However, she also has a lot of really good stances on environmental issues that match up well with Sunrise.
Yeah, we're currently attempting to get a little solar panel project at one of our universities. I know. And this is super small scale compared to the parking lot thing you just mentioned. But I do know that CCBC has done that with their parking lots. They did that a few years ago. They have the whole parking lot's covered with panels all over it. So I think for environmental movements, at least this is just my unexpert opinion. I think one of the biggest challenges is just it's just getting people to be aware and care. And that seems like that wouldn't be because people walk out their front door and they see the challenges right in their face, and I think people just accept that's what life is. You know what I mean? They don't really know any difference.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's not always clear how some of these problems in Baltimore are connected to environmentalism. For instance, Baltimore has one of the highest rates of evictions in the nation. And a lot of people wouldn't consider that as an environmental issue. But when we're looking at this through an environmental justice lens, if people are getting evicted at a high rate, then that also increases the rate of dumping. And when you have trash being dumped everywhere, then that's going to end up in the harbor, or that's going to end up in our alleyways. So it's all really interconnected. And the more that we can create policies at a local level that address these interconnected problems, like the more equitable our city is going to be, and also the more green our city is going to be. So in that way, we see that, you know, a lot of these racial and economic issues are also actually environmental issues as well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because like if it's the highest rate, or like one of the higher rates of evictions, that what that also says is that like there's less people who have a reason to be invested in their community, and take a stand and care, and like go out of their way to make sure the community looks good, or like is thriving. You know what I mean? So if the people are constantly on the move home to home, they're not gonna like care to put the time in to their community and their street, and they're not gonna care if the alley's dirty or stuff like that. You know what I mean? They don't have any personal wealth invested into the area.
That's what I was gonna say. I feel like a lot of people don't like see the actual impact of it yet amongst themselves, but people like say like commercial fishermen or people that do crabbing in Baltimore, they directly see a result of nutrients, nitrogen running off into the streams, into the harbor, and creating algae blooms and killing the fish and crabs that they would have sold. So it's economically impacting them. I think the reason so many people seem to be careless about the topic right now is really because it's not in any way affecting them.
Or not in a tangible way that they can see, right? Like, I mean, air pollution isn't something that you can readily see until it's really, really bad. You know, like Baltimore does not have great quality air, but you wouldn't know that if you walk outside, because on most days you're just like, oh, it's cloudy or it's sunny. You know, you're not seeing that air pollution. And when in fact it's killing us and leading to one of the highest rates of asthma also in the nation. We have a 40% rate of hospitalizations due to asthma, compared to the rest of the country where that's 15%. So that's a huge difference. But again, that's not something that people are going to notice when they walk out the door.
Well, actually, I mean, with the Brusco incinerator, for example, you can actually see the clouds of smoke coming out of the smokestack. But so many people in Baltimore don't really understand that that's really toxic emissions coming from burning trash. In fact, some organizers at Free Your Voice and the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, who we know, told us that the kids at the schools where they organize used to call it the cloud maker. They just thought that the incinerator was producing clouds, but it's really just, you know, the really toxic emissions that those kids are then breathing in, developing asthma and other respiratory issues.
I read
so sad.
I read in preparation for this that living close to that incinerator is like living in the house with a smoker.
Wow.
Yes.
That's the type of impact that has. When I was younger, and like still to this day, I never knew it was when I was younger, I didn't know it was a trash incinerator. I mean, I always thought it was just the Baltimore Tower. Like, it was always just so pretty to me. I mean, I still like the look of it now. Obviously, I don't like what it does, but so if there's ever a movement to get rid of it, I'm gonna say keep the Baltimore part, because I just thought it was just I always thought it just every time you drive into it, it was just so pretty. But I mean, obviously, it's killing people.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would be fine with leaving the tower up as long as it wasn't in operation. As long as there wasn't actual pollution coming out of it. You know, we can keep a tower that says Baltimore. But the main problem with the incinerator is that, so this thing was started in 1985. And incinerators year after year get more expensive to maintain, because the pollution controls on them wear out over time. So the costs accumulate, but the actual amount, the cost savings you're getting from sending trash there decrease. So it's vastly inefficient in terms of how much money the city is spending on it. And then the other problem is that right now it's classified as a renewable energy source, which is problematic in a few ways. In my opinion, the most egregious way it's bad is that it doesn't actually produce that much renewable energy. it produces like maybe a fourth of what you can get out of like a few solar panels. Like it's not efficient way to produce energy, and the amount of pollution it produces is just astronomically higher. Like this incinerator is dirtier than the top 4 coal plants in Maryland. So it's absolutely not clean or renewable, but it gets money from clean and renewable like tax credits because of the way it's classified.
And that's obviously some corruption.
Yeah, so there's been a fight throughout 2020 to end the contract with this Wheelabrator incinerator, and the outgoing mayor just extended it for 10 more years instead of allowing the new mayor to look at the contract and say, hey, maybe we want to do something different. He said, no, we're going to keep this for 10 more years.
Oh, he got that one as the buzzer.
Right. And the thing about this is that, you know, when we're talking about also economic justice, like the incinerator employs maybe 50 to 60 people. If we had gotten rid of the incinerator and transitioned toward a zero waste model of trash management, we could have created, you know, 1,800 jobs versus 50 to 60. And those jobs could have come from places like South Baltimore, Sandtown, you know, where the incinerator primarily affects the air quality and where jobs are desperately needed. Like that's also where the housing crisis is worse, right?
And I also read that it's not even just Baltimore City's trash; it's also like Howard County and Anne Arundel counties. So, I at least I don't know how how that functions out, how like the red tape that they go through to that, but it doesn't seem fair to me that the Baltimore City communities have to suffer from Howard County and Anne Arundel county's trash. You know what I mean? So that should be their problems to figure out. That's causing health damage to Baltimore City residents that trash is coming from miles and miles away, places that people in Baltimore City might never even go to.
Yeah, and I think that gets back
Absolutely.
to the bigger point of how like interconnected those issues are, right? Because it's like we have to tackle economic inequality at the same time as environmental inequality because they are so heavily intertwined. Corporations and land use and stuff like that targets the places where people are the least likely to fight back or the least able to, like most politically disenfranchised communities, and then it essentially exacerbates all of the issues that already exist in those communities in terms of economic inequality. So yeah, I think that's a really great connection between how these are very much intertwined and there are solutions that can address both at the same time.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's remember that the area around like Westport and the communities in South Baltimore that are right by the incinerator are predominantly Black and low income. So of course, throughout our country, disproportionately, landfills and toxic industrial sites are placed near Black and low income communities, and that's why it's called environmental racism, because you wouldn't find those polluting industries in wealthy white neighborhoods. And we unfortunately have just decided that those communities are disposable, and that's what we're organizing against. And a Green New Deal absolutely needs to be investing in those communities that have been marginalized first.
I think again, I think just one of the biggest challenges with especially environmental stuff is Baltimore is one of the most dangerous cities in the nation. It's like when people have to worry about their livelihood on a day-to-day basis, they're not thinking about the long-term consequences that stuff like an incinerator or the harbor has on their health. You know what I mean? I don't really think there's much of an answer to they're all intertwined. Like you have to fight the crime. You have to fix the lead poisoning that is a proponent that's adding to the crime. But at the same time, it's hard to get people to care about the lead poisoning. It's hard to get people to care about the incinerator when they have to deal with the city and what it throws at them on a daily basis. So it's just a super difficult problem, and I don't think really people have too much of an answer for it. But that leads to people who have the ability to fight it, such as yourselves. But it's such a big hill to climb up. You know what I mean? It's kind of just unlucky.
Well, I mean, our hope is that we're bringing more attention to these issues, and I mean, definitely Sunrise's mission is really to build popular public support for a Green New Deal and for acting on the urgency of the climate crisis and also tackling racial and income inequality at the same time. And, you know, as you mentioned earlier, like we're just so used to having a government that doesn't invest in, you know, our communities and will never ever like act on the climate crisis and just instead hands out, you know, helps out fossil fuel executives and, you know, corporations instead of the people. And we really want to try to change the political common sense in our country. We want people to realize that like our government should work for us, and we should actually be able to influence our government to instead of, you know, investing in the police, investing in military, investing in you know, huge tax cuts for corporations and, you know, those on the top. Like we want our government to actually be taking the solutions that exist. You know, we know how to you know, remove lead from old homes. We know how to install solar panels and wind, and we know how to compost and recycle. Like, why aren't we actually investing in implementing these solutions and, you know, stop, like we can stop polluting our communities, and we just need to actually like build the political will for that.
Right. I mean, just building off that, Evelyn, like there is certainly one way to look at it, which is like, this is so many huge problems. Like this is an insurmountable hill, but you know, the other way to look at that is like, wow, there's a lot of work to do here. Like this could mean a lot of jobs and a lot of investment in the community, and we could give people stake in their neighborhoods, and we could have a much greener city as a result.
Yeah, and just kind of building on that again, I think the thing that I love about Sunrise that really drew me to it is that it is this really amazing intersectional movement that's really pushing people who have historically been left out of the political process into the position to have some political stake. And so, like, people of color, young people, environmentalists, people that, you know, have always had to be kind of fighting the status quo, coming together and, you know, making a really united movement around it has been really, really enthusiastic. I guess for me, like, it's made things more optimistic. I'm less terrified about things like the climate crisis as a result, because you can see how lots of people are realizing that these are problems, and that's like the first step to really making that change and building the movement behind it.
So is there kind of like a divide in the Democratic Party in Baltimore? Because like the Democratic Party, at least like currently, is looked as like the party that strives for like the environment, as compared to like a Trump Republican Party. But obviously Baltimore is in the state that it is, and it's pretty much it's all ran by Democrats to an extent. Like you guys back certain politicians. Like, do you guys see a divide between the Democratic Party in Baltimore?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this divide, thanks, Evelyn. I think this divide also exists nationally, right? Like the difference between the AOC Democrats and the Clinton Democrats. And this exists in Baltimore too. So, I mean, more establishment Democrats who have spent years advocating for the status quo and who continue to funnel money into, you know, paying for more expensive police cars and more weapons for the police, versus Democrats like Brandon Scott, who have said, hey, we need to get lead out of all these houses in West Baltimore because kids are dying from lead poisoning, right? Kids are growing up with learning defects from lead poisoning. So that definitely exists, definitely. And it's just all about trying to push the Democrats who are interested in making meaningful change into the right places, and trying to put pressure on the Democrats who aren't interested in that into being interested in that, or just getting them out of office.
And that's why our organizing really focuses on pushing Democrats rather than Republicans. We've largely just written off the Republican Party because they don't even claim to care about these issues. Whereas Democrats claim to care about the environment, and they care to claim about, you know, the people, and racial justice and economic justice. But most of the time, establishment Democrats don't actually, you know, back their words with action. So that's why we try to hold them accountable. Whereas, you know, we kind of just want Republicans out of power because they suck.
Yeah, I haven't really heard of any Republican movements in Baltimore at all. So, other than
Klasick.
Yeah, other than Klasick, which is.
Well, she doesn't even live here. She lives in Middle River. Didn't even live in the 7th Congressional District.
She thought she could win off the Democrats aren't doing anything, so vote me. which I mean, who knows? But like you said, there's like, are they? I don't. To me, I get frustrated with party politics because there can be a divide within the party. You know what I mean? I again like the incinerator deal. How like the last mayor just got that buzzer beater in right before new dude came in. Like stuff like that's just. Wait, he wasn't even elected though.
He wasn't even elected. That's
Yeah.
correct. That's another reason why it's just.
Was he a
completely-
Democrat?
He was a Democrat.
Oh man, he might be undercover. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's really the thing. Like in our one-party city, of course, that the real mayoral race was the primary because, that's when all of these Democrats are running on, slightly different platforms, all under the Democratic Party. But, we really saw huge differences between the candidates, and we just really saw a candidate that we could support in Scott, and we're really, really happy that we were able to get involved in his campaign and that he won.
Yeah, I definitely. This is like the first mayoral campaign. I mean, I was too young for the other ones. For when the last mayor who was I forget why she got kicked out. Hers was something
Catherine
to do with
Pugh.
yeah.
She was doing some shady backroom deals for her books, and
wasn't she
got
stealing
caught
gift
on
cards?
that.
No, that was Sheila.
Well, that was Dixon.
No, that was
Okay.
Sheila.
The election this time around.
She ran again. That
As
was
Democrat.
Yeah, she did. Okay, yeah, she ran again. Okay, yeah. See, we got some characters, but
We do.
but that just shows how much like the power that who has the money and what they can do with the money, and like even people who want something completely different than what their team wants or like what other people on their team wants, they have to stay with that team because of the money. And these are problems that I mean, I guess environmental justice isn't like I want to give my money to that. Like that's not really, you know what I mean? Like people who have the money, that's not gonna make them more money to a certain extent. Like that's not something that people get excited about, and that's the sad truth. You know what I mean? So it just seems like a real uphill battle, especially with a divided Democratic Party in Baltimore City.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
go ahead, Evelyn.
I mean, really all politicians will talk about, wanting to, create more jobs. We're here in America, of course, we're obsessed with, work ethic and, bringing yourself up by your bootstraps and, like hard work and really like the Green New Deal is all about like job creation. Like there's so much work to be done to, remove toxins from our communities, to stop emitting fossil fuels and like just roll out clean energy nationwide and especially in Baltimore, and like that's just millions of good jobs that we can create. And we also need to make sure that those are good jobs, those are unionized jobs, high wage jobs, that good people who need them. How
would like a Green New Deal Baltimore, like how would that look different than from today? I mean, obviously the incinerator will be gone, but I mean we can't really. Is there really any place to put like not solar panels, windmills? Are we talking about just massive solar panels on top of every building we can find? What would it look like to like replace what's in Baltimore? Because that's the only, that's the biggest. When I hear Green New Deal, and then the biggest counterpoint is like, yes, like that's good, get rid of fossil fuels, but what's going to replace that for one, and then also two, that's going to put. They always say it's going to put the U.S. behind economically because we're going to be fossil fuel dependent because cars are still going to need to run on fossil fuel and stuff like that.
So in my mind, so when I think about a Green New Deal and what that would look like in Baltimore, just to address the first part of your question, I'm thinking about revamping of the public transportation system. So building the Red Line, increasing the amount of buses that we have and making sure that those buses are electric, expanding the metro if that is a viable thing that we can do, finishing the Baltimore Urban Tree Project to get like all of these trees planted across Baltimore to reduce the urban heat island effect so the city is not as hot in the summer. So connecting the city so people can move easily around, increasing the amount of trees, increasing access to green space, The great thing about renewable energy projects like solar and wind is that these projects can be based inside of communities. You can put solar panels now pretty much anywhere. The technology is advanced so much over the past 10 years. And to be quite honest with you, by the middle of the next decade, fossil fuels like natural gas, oil, and coal are going to be unprofitable because it's so difficult to get to them now. Like the extraction process is so expensive that it's just flat out not profitable. So renewable energy is cheaper, it's more efficient, and it can be controlled locally. So there's already like there's several companies in Baltimore do like Neighborhood Sun who do community solar projects. So if you sign up for these, you're getting your electricity from solar farms in Baltimore County and in Baltimore City. And this doesn't even necessarily mean that you have to have the solar panels on your house. It's just coming from another place. You know, it would mean tons more jobs to upgrade our electrical grid, to implement a zero waste framework for Baltimore City so we don't have to incinerate our trash or put it in the landfill, which is almost at capacity already, right? So that's tons of jobs in processing waste, recycling, composting. So it'd be a huge program that would boost employment, better what our communities look like, and clean up our air and water. But to me, that's what a Green New Deal would look like for Baltimore City.
And who's fighting against it?
Good
the
question.
inertia of our current political establishment, definitely fossil fuel executives, certainly Bresco. I mean, they sued the city for for trying to clean our air. Like the Clean Air Act that Baltimore City passed in 2018 was basically overturned in court because Bresco was like, we don't want to uphold this, and now
we don't want to. Yeah.
And that's
we want to continue.
That's where that difficulty of awareness comes in, because it's just these big corporations are able to do whatever because the amount of people who are even somewhat aware of the problem who will want this green New Deal, whose neighborhoods it would impact directly, they're not able to voice their opinion because it's not the biggest thing on their plate right now. You know what I mean? Then those corporations are able to do that.
So certainly one part of it is the huge vested money that these established corporations have. And we know that they give a lot of money to electoral campaigns that helps some of those establishment Democrats sort of keep the status quo. So that is one problem. And then the other problem is education. You know, if people don't know that zero waste or that solar panels or solar energy is an option for them, then they're not going to go out and get it, right? Like this needs to be readily available to people. And part of that comes through education that the city needs to do. So if we were to roll out a zero waste, the city would need to send out a lot of pamphlets to people living in neighborhoods where this was going to start, to be like, look, this is how the new system is going to work. And that education has just largely been absent. And nonprofits like Sunrise and the Sierra Club and Blue Water Baltimore have sort of had to step up and fill the gap. But when you have like tons of different organizations doing smaller scale education, you know, like in different parts of the city, that's not super comprehensive. So we need a comprehensive system in order to make this really effective.
I mean, most articles I read and from what I know, like I see the awareness in the white neighborhoods like Fells, like Fed Hill and Fells Point and Locust Point and like Hamden and places like that. But I don't really see any of the awareness, or like it doesn't seem like any like reporters or anybody's giving the mic to people from Brooklyn or people from Westport. And I think again, like, the awareness needs to be there. Like somebody needs to put an effort in to get those people from Sandtown, like to get involved in stuff like this because it impacts them the most. You know what I mean? Like I see the white neighborhoods are obviously involved in it, but I don't see anybody giving the pen and paper or the microphone to the black neighborhoods.
I totally I totally hear what you're saying. I want to push back on that just a little bit, not to contradict you, but so in Baltimore, the movement for I know I talk about zero waste a lot, but the movement to transition to zero waste has largely been spearheaded by communities in Brooklyn and Curtis Bay and South Baltimore who live with this high concentration of waste processing facilities and the incinerator, because they are frankly tired of living in proximity to all of these highly polluted sites. And the South Baltimore Land Trust, along with a ton of different communities down there, have done a lot of work working with Fair Development Baltimore, as well as the Office of Sustainability, to just say, like, to put together a zero waste plan for Baltimore City. And they actually did come out with a comprehensive plan for Baltimore that the new mayor says he's fully on board for. But then we had the incinerator contract get re-signed. So it's 100% true that these white neighborhoods get a lot more resources from the city, and that the black and brown neighborhoods often get far fewer. But it's also true that there's quite a lot of activism and organizing happening in these black and brown communities saying, look, like, this is not okay. Like, we should not have to be a dumping ground. Like, these facilities should not be concentrated in our neighborhoods. And here's a plan for the entire city of Baltimore in which we could eliminate the need for these facilities altogether.
Now, with stuff like this... go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, yeah, I mean, we really appreciate you inviting us onto your podcast, but definitely next time you should invite folks from South Baltimore Community Land Trust, For Your Voice, United Workers, who have been doing, like, really, like, most of the organizing around, shutting down the incinerator and transitioning to zero waste for years. And,
I would definitely be more
very well connected with them. We really do want to uplift their voices.
Of course.
So, like, we're super happy that, like, Shashonda Campbell from South Baltimore Community Land Trust is on Brandon Scott's transition team, and we really can't wait to see what she does to put us on the path for zero waste.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would definitely love to reach out to any of those groups, and they're more than welcome on here. But my next question was, now I know, like, stuff like education and, like, school systems, like, the money for the schools come from property taxes of the neighborhoods around them. That is the same, like, for projects like you guys work on and stuff like that. So is there any effort to change that? Because to me, that's one of the most destructive systems that's ever been set up. Like, why would public schools, that's the schooling curriculum's the same for schools in Maryland, but the schools get different money based on the property taxes. So obviously the poor kids are going to stay poor because their education's not offered the same. They don't get the same access to resources, and these neighborhoods don't get the same access to resources as well. Is there any effort? I mean, this is a question probably unrelated, but do you guys see that as a problem as well?
Absolutely. I mean, our house isn't, like, entirely, like, we don't really do a ton of organizing around, like,
I was about to say, I was about to ask that question.
But it's really all connected, like, just black and brown communities are systematically underinvested in education and, like, environmental pollution, and resources, access to jobs, access to public transit, safe housing, really everything. And so, like, that's why, like, a Green New Deal needs to prioritize communities that have been underinvested in. And absolutely, like, education is a huge part of the Green New Deal. We absolutely need to be paying teachers, good wages. We need to make sure that every child in our country gets, access to a good education, a good free public education. And, that's how we're going to have a future.
Yeah, at least when it comes to politics, that's the number one problem I have. Like, if you don't think that's evil, like, you're gonna, like, the kids get different money based on, like, obviously, like, if they have poor parents and you're gonna tell them they get less opportunity at school, that's always been, like, my number one problem with the world. I punch the air about that on a daily basis, but, like, it's all connected, and it definitely, the awareness needs to be there, and it's hard to get to that. But now, as far as the harbor goes, like, a lot of people, what were the numbers you were telling me earlier, Sam?
1 second, I gotta try to
he
find
said
it.
He said what was it, like, over 1 million cigarette butts in a 2 mile radius, right?
Yeah, it was like couple 100,000 plastic bags, over a couple million cigarette butts, and they were saying the cost of it would be $20 to $30 million to meet the requirements of the improvement of the harbor.
Yeah, the harbor is like what, the biggest tourist attraction in Baltimore, and to me it's wild that the politicians don't seem like they're super enthusiastic about saving that or stopping any of that.
What were those numbers you said, Sam? 20 to 30 million to clean up the harbor? Is that what you were saying?
Yep. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
no, that's what I'm saying. Like
that
doesn't seem like a lot, especially like if that's the biggest tourist attraction.
Right. They can't say they don't have the money because that Bresco contract that we were talking about, that's $10 million every year for the next 10 years. Okay, so they can't say that they don't have the money to clean up the harbor if we can spend $100 million on an incinerator over 10 years. This is total bullshit.
Absolutely. And like, just imagine like what the harbor would be like if you could actually go swimming in it.
Amazing.
Like just how much that could, increase like,
I could die
tourism
peacefully.
to our city.
I could die peacefully after a swim in the harbor. My life would be complete. I wouldn't need anything else. If I live to see that, I'll die the next day.
Once upon a time when I was a kid, I did swim in the harbor, and I don't have a third arm, so maybe it's not that bad, but I'm not going to do that again until the authorities say that it's safe. And hopefully by 2030, that's the goal, right? But maybe James can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that just in general, when you think about these like more, like you were saying, environmentalist type of issues, there isn't as much mobilization behind it, because when you think about the people who are most directly stakeholders of policies that are going to change the harbor, those are people that live in the city, and those are people, like you said, who have so much more on their plate already in terms of what their policy can support. And so I think one of the best things about the Green New Deal is it is bridging that gap between, okay, the environment is our one choice, or the economy, we can't have either. It's really saying we can reinvigorate our economy, we can invest in our public sectors, we can build great jobs that solve these environmental problems. And it's not just some green issue, it's not just some tree hugger issues. These are issues that actually affect everybody, and they're worth investing in. And like I said, building that large movement behind it is, I think, how we're going to get those types of solutions. But until we recognize the interconnectedness, I think that's why you don't see a lot of push for genuine push or active push to really actually get changes for the harbor, because it's a lot harder to get that when it's just the environmentalist type of people that are actually working towards it. You need more people bought into that movement, and you need to show that it is connected. So again, I think that's why Green New Deal Baltimore is such a really, really almost revolutionary idea, because it's taking all of these like preconceived notions of this is our issues, that's their issues, these are those issues, and it's showing how they're connected and how there can be solutions that solve them all together.
Totally. And we often just kind of forget that us humans live in the environment, and we're not going to have an economy if we don't have a planet to live on. And the climate crisis, it's not just about like polar bears dying and icebergs melting and coral reefs getting bleached. Like these are people's lives, people's homes. Like Baltimore is expecting to see like sea level rise, and waterfront areas like getting increased tidal flooding, and of course like Black and brown neighborhoods in Baltimore are currently seeing like the hottest temperatures during the summer. McElderry Park over in East Baltimore is the hottest neighborhood in Baltimore City, whereas the coolest neighborhood is over by Gwens Falls and Lincoln Park, over in like a very wealthy white neighborhood that has lots of tree canopy.
Yeah, it's really not also out of the imagination that with the current level of sea level rise that we have projected over the next 30 years, that if a hurricane was to come up and hit Baltimore, we would see massive devastation. And I know Baltimore is not really known for being hit by hurricanes, but if the climate continues to warm at the pace that it is currently warming, we're going to see hurricanes start moving farther and farther north up the eastern seaboard. And with that addition of sea level rise, like it could start to become devastating for cities like DC and Baltimore and Boston, who have harbors and who are right on the coast. So, while we want to focus right now on the most immediate issues, like increasing tree cover, like moving to zero waste, like cleaning up the harbor, we're also have our eye on these longer term issues where like sea level rise and flooding, because this is going to be a reality for us in the 40s.
And also don't forget that the incinerators are right on the water. Like Curtis Bay is totally going to be underwater in 50, 100 years, and that's not going to be good for anybody.
You don't want all that mercury in the water. Really don't.
Although maybe it would finally shut down the incinerators for good if they're underwater.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, there's not really, doesn't seem like to be an example to follow. Baltimore seems to be a unique city. For one, it's decently small, and for two, the location of it is there's not really other cities like it. I guess DC, but most cities are either just in the middle of the land or like they're on like the ocean kind of. We're tucked up all the way at the top of the Chesapeake Bay almost. So we don't really have like there's no like other example of, oh, this is what they're doing that we can point to and follow. Like it's kind of just trailblazing at this point and trying to make what we can.
Well, I think the cool thing about Baltimore being a unique city is that we're also going to have unique solutions to these problems. Like, it's very good to be able to look at like a city like San Francisco, who has like an excellent recycling, composting program, and be like, okay, like what are good things working there that we could take example of? But it wouldn't work to just take San Francisco's model of zero waste and apply it onto Baltimore, because like you said, Baltimore is a totally different city. And what's cool about the Green New Deal is that it really advocates for that local approach to these issues. Like if you can localize the solutions, it's going to be so much more effective than just taking a blanket policy and putting it all over the whole United States.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. That's exactly what I was getting at. Like, Baltimore is definitely unique and definitely great city in America. So we're gonna need a solution that's just for us. And I feel like I definitely see more awareness now. Like I just stumbled upon your guys' page a few months ago, and I immediately reached out because I wasn't super aware. For one, I'm trying to get more aware of the environment. Obviously, this is the first time. Like I said, you're the first group I found, and I immediately wanted to reach out and get knowledge and talk to and have a conversation. But now I'm definitely gonna have my eyes open for others, and like definitely let me know the ones that you said earlier. So I can definitely get in contact with them. But I feel like it is, especially in today's political climate, like people hear Green New Deal a lot, and at least for me, like I said, I'm not super familiar with it. I've read a little bit of it. I know the basics of it, and I know the counterpoint that everybody says. But I think everybody, like, this is a project, or at least the movement, environmental movements are movements that help everyone. But it's really you as an individual that needs to like put the effort in. You know what I mean? Like, you can't rely on other people to do it for you, because it's a joint venture. It really is more than other movements. At least that's how I view it. Like, because you need to be self-aware to, for one, just, I mean, even small things like stop littering, but even beyond that, just like educating yourself, and then eventually hoping to educate others. And that's exactly what we're doing with the podcast now, so other people can get this information.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of like the problem that, the way we've approached climate change action in the past is we've always put the responsibility on individuals. Like, oh, you want to stop climate change? Well, you need to drive less and you need to like turn off your lights, when really like we know that it's not individuals who are responsible for the climate crisis. It's fossil fuel executives. With COVID and absolutely everything shutting down, people thought that would be, a huge way to reduce emissions. But emissions only dropped about 17%, I believe. It's like 100 corporations are responsible for something like 70% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Like it's really corporations, and like we need collective government action to actually solve the climate crisis. It's not going to be individuals. And even now that there's more awareness about climate change, there's not as many climate change deniers. It's really not, a socially acceptable political position anymore. Now you see, companies like Shell and BP, all the fossil fuel companies, are trying to go out and greenwash and say like, oh yeah, we're lowering our greenhouse gas emissions. We're gonna, be net zero emissions by 2050. Only in their operations, they're still going to be, drilling for oil and selling oil, which is, what is responsible for the climate crisis.
And we see this at a local level in Baltimore. One of the points that, Wheelabrator, the owner of the incinerator, likes to make a lot is oh, well, the real polluter in Baltimore is all the cars we have on the road. People need to stop driving so much. But if we shut down Wheelabrator, it would be equivalent to taking half the cars in Baltimore off the road if we just shut down Wheelabrator. And when you think about, which of those two options is easier, well, it's definitely easier to shut down one incinerator than to ask half the people of Baltimore to stop driving when we don't have a real public transportation system.
Which we also need to invest in, but that's another story.
Yeah, totally. But it just goes to show that like the fossil fuel industry and a lot of these companies, they have a very long history of gaslighting when it comes to public health and trying to push the responsibility onto the individual when science has long supported this. Individuals cannot better the air quality. Like that's not flat out not the solution. Like individuals, recycling is not going to fix the problem when half the city doesn't even have bins to put their recycling in. This is a systemic issue, and in order to address it, we need system-wide solutions. So it's really just not enough to say that as an individual, I'm going to drive less or I'm always going to recycle, because the issue is just so much bigger than that.
And certainly we should all be doing our part, be responsible in your own personal actions. But really the way that we're actually going to tackle the climate crisis is by organizing together and actually changing the way that we run our society and run our economy.
What are the main problems with the transit in Baltimore? I mean, I haven't really done too much riding public transit since I was in like high school. So, I mean, I didn't really have any complaints back then, but I was also ignorant. And also, Baltimore's not too big of a city. So what are the problems for one? And then like what is like you guys envision as like an ideal future?
Well, I think the first project that they would need to start back up is the Red Line. So back when Obama was president in his second term, the state of Maryland actually got a huge package of money to invest in public transportation. And part of that money was supposed to go to building the Red Line. If you guys aren't familiar with what that is, essentially it was a metro line that was supposed to connect East and West Baltimore and meet up with the current metro line we have that comes down from Hunt Valley all the way down to where Camden Yards is. So it would have made a T of public transportation in Baltimore, really connecting all points of the city. Governor Hogan decided that Baltimore didn't need that money for public transportation, and the whole project was canceled. What they did with that money instead was build more highways, which is completely the opposite direction we need to move. If we had a good system of public transportation in Baltimore, a lot less people would be driving. So that would be fewer emissions. If we had good bike lanes in all parts of the city, fewer people would be driving. So again, that would be fewer emissions. So it's really about making our streets safe for bikers and also opening them up to public transportation.
We also really need to, gain local control over our public transit system as well. Right now, it's controlled by the state of Maryland, and so if the state doesn't want to do something, then we don't get it. Whereas, of course, Baltimoreans saw how beneficial the Red Line would have been for our city, and then Hogan just decided that he didn't like the uprisings after Freddie Gray's murder and thought that Baltimore didn't need this public transit. And that was just a really, really racist, terrible decision on his part. And he returned so many millions of federal dollars just because he didn't want our city to have, nice things. And really, light rail development really spurs further development and investment. If you build a rail line, you're going to see transit-oriented development around those stations in a way that you don't really see when you add more bus lines. Bus lines tend to follow development, whereas rail lines spur development. So, that would be another additional benefit to investing in more light rail projects in our city.
We also see that, you know, I mean, just take for example, Amazon, when it was looking for a new site, they were looking for what cities had good public transportation so that their workers could get to the warehouse to work. Baltimore doesn't have good transportation. I mean, we already had an Amazon warehouse, so we weren't a candidate. But I mean, imagine if a company like Apple wanted to put a plant here. I mean, I would not be in favor of a plant that was not electrical and that was putting emissions out there. But as far as jobs go, like, public transportation is absolutely critical to bringing in jobs. It's absolutely essential, and we just don't really have that robust transportation system.
And the transit system that we do have is currently really focused in the white L and not as much in the black butterfly. Like, you know, think about the free to ride Charm City circulator. That all runs in the white L. And the red line specifically would have really connected East and West Baltimore, you know, where, you know, folks in the black butterfly could actually get around. And, you know, those are also the areas where car ownership is much lower than in whiter and richer areas of Baltimore. Something about like a third of Baltimoreans don't actually own cars, and that statistic goes up to like 50% in some parts of Baltimore. So,
And
you know, like
that's.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that's really strongly correlated with the employment numbers and unemployment numbers. In places where you see more cars now, currently the unemployment numbers are a little bit better. And that is, surprise, surprise, if you own a car, it's easier to get to your job. But if we had valid public transportation options, people wouldn't necessarily need a car to get to their job. And it would be much easier for them to go out and do interviews or go out and get a job.
Yeah, I used to take the bus to work, and it would take me about an hour and a half each way. And it's a 20-minute drive. It's ridiculous.
So that's a huge barrier for a lot of people.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The bus, I haven't been on the bus since they changed the routes. Actually, maybe one time, but the bus ain't really fun. Actually, the bus is a fun place to be, but it's not fun when it's cold outside. You gotta get to work. Definitely not.
When the bus just never comes.
And when you need to get on more than one bus, you don't even go to work. Yeah, nah, that's not good. But so they want to build the red line. They were gonna build a light rail.
That was the plan, yes.
Secondary light rail.
We're hoping to see it still. You know, let's see if we can reverse that decision, you know, either through taking back control of our public transit system and creating a regional transit authority that can actually make better decisions for our city, you know, led by actual public transit riders that actually represent our transit community here in Baltimore. Or, you know, like another way the red line shouldn't be dead. You know, just because one governor made a shitty decision doesn't mean that, you know, it can never come here. We absolutely need it here. And I think there's definitely like a lot of political will for it, but, you know, we definitely need to push it over the top and actually make it happen.
I would feel like there would be, obviously there's not, but I would feel like there would be more willingness to do it, especially when you see, I think it's called like the Purple Line in like PG County that they're doing like a lot of building for and construction for now. Of
course, that's where Hogan's, you know, home properties are, and he really wanted to service those areas and not Baltimore City.
That makes perfect sense. But I don't know why that wouldn't encourage him to do that other places as well. But
well, there are a lot of racial undertones to the transportation systems or transportation decisions that are made at a state level, which is why it's really important for Baltimore to be able to take control locally of our transportation system. Like as Evelyn was referencing earlier, one of the reasons why the Red Line never got invested in with that money from Obama was because the Freddie Gray riots happened. And I think Governor Hogan was imagining, like, you know, if I had this line, if I had a metro line from West Baltimore to East Baltimore, imagine how many more people could have gotten on that line and come downtown for those demonstrations, right? So there's a lot of racist undertones that are at play, and by localizing control of public transportation, we could work to eliminate that.
I mean, I don't know about that though. Isn't PG County like one of the blackest counties?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, it is. But
Yeah, so I don't know
Baltimore
about
City
racial
also
undertones.
has. Baltimore City has. I mean,
Baltimore's also
when
one of
you
the
look
blackest
at the
cities,
demographics
but
of Baltimore, exactly, and the Red Line would have connected a lot of those black neighborhoods to the predominantly white neighborhoods. So it would have been a step in undoing some of the redlining of Baltimore's neighborhoods that happened a long time ago. And we hope that the Red Line can still be built and, work to undo a lot of that.
And if you're looking for other podcast guests, you should probably reach out to Samuel Johnson of the Baltimore Transit Equity Coalition. He's a good friend of ours, and he does a lot of organizing around improving public transit here.
I'm definitely going to be asking you for like 80 names after this podcast.
We got those names for you.
But Sam, Ebenezer, you have any other questions? Ebenezer, do you have any questions at all? Because you haven't said one thing, but...
Yeah, it's kind of bugging me that I've just been quiet, but I'm pretty new to everything. I was just taking things in. I agree with a lot of what you say. I think it's inevitable. There needs to be some sort of restructuring. And then, again, like, I've never really met anyone with bad intentions. Everyone, like, makes a good case for whatever they're advocating for. I completely agree that like there needs to be like an awareness development, like
conscious
a conscious move towards like just awareness of everything in general.
Where are all these people that like own the incinerator? Where do they live at?
Like Australia.
Oh man. Yeah, that's not even in this. That's not even in this country. Yeah, they
not next to the incinerator. Yeah, they for sure don't live there.
Isn't that crazy how
like 27K a day or something? Some of our comms team were really looking into the finances behind Wheeler Brader Technologies, and they make bank off of polluting South Baltimore, and it's really sick.
And it was sold, right? There were like Americans that originally owned it. It was out of like New Jersey or something, and then it's sold at some point. I briefly looked into that, but isn't it crazy how money could just like muffle like just everything out? Like,
yeah, bro, I ain't heard the word muffle in a minute, but yeah, bro.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why like really like a big thing that we're organizing for is fighting the influence of fossil fuel money in our political system. We one of the major things that we do is we try to get politicians to commit to not taking contributions of more than $200 from fossil fuel executives, lobbyists, or executives and lobbyists, basically, like
stakeholders. I think that's the word you're looking for.
Not stakeholders. I mean, obviously, like the rank and file workers can donate, whatever they want to politicians, but we really don't want that overt influence of fossil fuel money, because they love donating to political campaigns, and that's how they've gotten their way in our political system. And really, like, one of the huge steps to actually like taking back control and reducing their influence is to not have them buying our politicians.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like there needs
and
to be
like
more...
I said, it's inevitable. Like, it either is gonna change now or they're gonna die off, and something's gonna happen. I'm just worried that the communities that have been historically disenfranchised, when the restructuring occurs, they're still left as the disenfranchised groups. Like that's what worries me the most.
That's why we absolutely need to be fighting for, equity in a Green New Deal. Like, Green New Deal cannot just be investing in the White L in Baltimore. It cannot be investing in America's wealthiest communities. It can't just be rich people putting solar panels on their own homes. Like, we need actual federal investment in historically underserved, marginalized communities.
Yeah, that brings a real good point. You guys are in contact with the dude who handled the red line, or whoever that is. He needs to change the name, because Baltimore's the first city to implement redlining, so they need to they're up to some bad mojo with that name. They should probably change that.
You're probably right about that one. I wanted to speak for a hot second about some of the money in politics and the fossil fuel money. One of the cool things that Baltimore as a city actually just did within the past 5 years is pass a bill to establish a fair elections fund. So, and a couple other cities around the country have done this, but essentially what it does is create an option for publicly funded election. So candidates that opt in to use the fair elections model, they pledge not to take contributions of a certain amount from, fossil fuel companies, corporations, and all of these other interests. And they pledge to get 80 to 90% of their donations from individuals of under a certain amount. So what that does in reality is it forces people running for office to not campaign for millions of dollars from one corporation, but instead to go out into communities and try to solicit donations from the people that they're actually going to be representing in order to run for office on the will of the people that they're representing. So that was a huge win for Baltimore. And getting money into that fair elections fund, possibly by taking some of it out of the police budget, would be a huge step in the right direction to electing a new set of representatives that really stand for the people and what the people want. So there is some good news on the horizon when it comes to money in politics, at least for Baltimore.
Sam, you got any
I was wondering, do you guys have any thoughts on nuclear energy?
That's a good one.
I would say that Sunrise Movement as a whole doesn't exactly have a firm position on that. I would say most of us are not a fan of it. We really see that through energy efficiency, wind, solar, and geothermal, we can really meet our energy needs. And I personally believe that there's just too many risks in nuclear energy. But then again, I'm not a nuclear scientist. I know there's a lot of advocates about it as well, but why invest in that when we could, invest in community-controlled, solar and wind?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a risk assessment as well as an economic assessment. The way I look for it is you always want to try to be as efficient as you possibly can. Being efficient with your money, nuclear costs on a scale many, many times more than solar and wind. Just upfront costs of actually installing and building a nuclear facility. Then if you want to look at it from the risk assessment point of view, a nuclear facility is infinitely riskier than solar and wind because you have to have cooling towers. And if we were to have a natural disaster, in Baltimore, and we did install a nuclear plant, it would start to look a lot like what happened in Japan with their Fukushima power plant. They had that tsunami, the cooling got flooded, the whole thing basically went to shit. And we're Baltimore. We're a city that's right on the water. We're looking at sea level rise over the next few years. Nuclear starts to look like a really risky option versus putting solar panels over vacant lots and helping to install wind off of our coast. Those are things that are a lot less risky and a lot cheaper and just, better for the environment in the long run.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just hearing the word nuke and then thinking about in my backyard doesn't sound good. But I do think that definitely the upfront cost is probably more. I think over time though it might. I mean, I don't know, but from what I've heard, because this is another, when I hear Green New Deal and then it's oh, why not nuclear? What I hear again is that with advancements and stuff like that, it's just, I feel like it would be different. I feel that's another thing, people can't really conceptualize what nuclear even is. You know what I mean? That's a word that the public can't really even understand, and that's the divide. You know what I mean? They don't really know what their options are. Because I know for damn sure I don't really know what that is. You know what I mean? I know what solar is. I know what a wind turbine is. The sad thing is I can't really I know what burning the trash and incinerator and stuff like that is, but I can't really conceptualize how that process works either, other than just like, oh, trash goes in, it gets burned. But I know it's more complicated than that, and it's a lot for people to get educated. But I think it's definitely what life calls for.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, I mean, as Evelyn says, Sunrise doesn't have like a very definitive position on nuclear energy. From a personal standpoint, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for immediately shutting down all nuclear plants we have in the United States, because they are technically cleaner than coal and natural gas. So, but I also don't really think that we need to be building more of them when we know that solar and wind are so much more efficient and cheaper. And they're going to continue to get more efficient and cheaper when with nuclear, we've sort of, we've hit a little bit of a scientific barrier with how much more efficient we can make that without dumping in billions of dollars. And we don't need to dump billions of dollars into solar and wind because technology is here and available.
And also, I mean, when you're talking about nuclear plants, like those are, very centralized sources of power generation. And, with the increased natural disasters that we're going to see during climate change, we're just going to see more wildfires in the west, more hurricanes in the south, and in our area as well, and more extreme heat events, flooding, all of these disasters that climate change is going to create, and that's just more opportunities for things to go wrong with electrical generation. And if you have it more distributed, if you have more solar panels and wind turbines like scattered throughout communities, that's just going to produce a more resilient power grid versus if you have one nuclear reactor that's serving all of the power needs of an entire region. Like, what if something happens to that? Then suddenly, where's your power?
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot to process. I hope.
This is probably a dumb question. What happens on a windless, cloudy day?
So that's actually a great question. So one of the things that the Green New Deal advocates for is not just saying like, okay, let's get all of our energy from wind and solar, but like we need to upgrade our electrical grid. And part of updating our electrical grid is installing battery stations. So on days when it is sunny and windy, when you have the current high-tech technology, you can produce more power than you need to use. So what you do with that excess power, so to speak, is you store it in these batteries. So when you get to that cloudless or windless day, you still have that surplus of power readily available, and it can go back into homes and where it is needed. So yes, that's 100% a huge part of it. And it's not a dumb question.
And then so you gotta make these batteries too, which is like a whole nother environmental issue on its own. So it's like you're chopping off like one head of the hydra and then two more grow like
What are you talking about, like lithium mining and stuff, Ebenezer?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's where. Go ahead, Evelyn.
Oh, just like, I mean, a lot of the Green New Deal is just acknowledging that we don't exactly have all the answers for transitioning to 100% clean energy right now. So much of the Green New Deal is going to be investing in R&D to actually like find solutions that are equitable and non-polluting to actually like transition over to clean energy. And yeah, absolutely, like polluting other countries, polluting Bolivia by mining all of their lithium is not what we're looking for either. So yeah, no, it's definitely a good question. I mean, I don't know a ton about battery technology, but I know that there are other options being explored, like using salt to charge batteries and stuff. I don't even know, and maybe like scientists don't quite know yet either, but there are solutions out there.
Yeah, and I was just going to add a really great book if you're interested in that specific part. There's a chapter in it about it. It's called Winning the Green New Deal. And one of the chapters in there talks about how, okay, well, if we get rid of fossil fuel companies and we avoid all of these crises, we need to do so in a way that doesn't ensure that the next, we don't have battery companies doing the same thing to us, lying to us, and doing all the horrible things that fossil companies have done over the years and stuff. So I think one of the other things that's talked about a lot is just how, making more public investments and making general just corporations and things like that more accountable to the public is going to be a huge part of it as well, because it's a lot easier for it to not be transparent if we don't have any accountability, all this pollution, things like that. So another thing that's really interesting, the concept of like circular economies and moving away from we make these things, we break them, and then we throw them away, but rather we use them and reuse them. And I think that's a lot of what the battery discussions that I've heard looking forward to talk about, is how we can make these things, but then they're not just toxic waste and trash when we're done with them, but we actually create ones that can be used and reused, stuff like that.
Well, thank you all for coming. Any last questions, or does anybody have any last questions or concerns or anything?
Just thank you so much again for bringing us on. It's been great chatting with all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us your time, and I'll definitely be in contact with about the anybody who you think would have a good thing to say on the podcast. We're definitely looking for that.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
I'll get you that list shortly.
Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you. Have
Yeah.
a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you guys.
Bye.